Joining us right now, GOP political strategist. Also, he's got a podcast in conjunction with the Washington Times, Mac on Politics. It's Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Chad. Good morning. I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing well. Thank you very much for joining the show today. I want to start off real quick with just taking a look overall at the legislature. I know you referenced this in your morning email, a article from the Tribune, about 6 weeks left for lawmakers to come together on some, not only the budget, but on some maybe some other pieces of legislation. They always seem to get the budget done, and they always seem to get some major things done, but 6 weeks, not a long time left, is it?
No, that's right, and oftentimes you see these patterns over sessions where the Senate passes the bills they want to pass early, the House passes the bills they want to pass early, and then each body holds back bills from the other body because they want to, kind of increase their own leverage. And generally, these legislative sessions sort of break down, and then they come back together at the end. And that's kind of where we are now. I think they are starting to move some bills from the other bodies, so there has been a little bit of a breakthrough. But you're right, the budget is always the biggest issue. It's the one thing the Constitution requires the legislature do every 2 years. The House and Senate are still pretty far apart in terms of the overall amount of money that they want to spend. And so the conference committee between the two bodies is getting together now and trying to work that out. And that, if there is a special session, which I'm not sure there will be, but if there is, it'll be the budget is probably the most likely item to force one. But a special session is something nobody wants.
You probably saw the picture that was tweeted out from the governor. It was the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker, and I think Glenn Hager was in there as well. But between the big three, it looked like there was a lot of fake smiling going on. Do you think there are a lot of fake smiles between the three of those men right now?
Yeah, what's interesting about that is that's actually a fairly common thing. I believe during session they get together every week or every other week. It used to be called the triumvirate, although at some point in recent history the comptroller was added to that, particularly as it relates to the budget. I think it's important to make sure the comptroller, Glenn Hager's there. But what's interesting about that is that at least from what I read and what I gather, there's not a lot that leaks out of those meetings. And, you can imagine a scenario where the lieutenant governor and the speaker are sharing frank viewpoints with each other, and the governor's there sort of refereeing it and trying to figure out a pathway forward between what the two leaders want to do or have the support to do within their own conferences. So we'll see. The governor cares about his emergency items more than anything else, and we know that CPS reform has passed both houses and is on a fast track. But the other issues, Convention of States, I think is likely. Sanctuary cities, the House is finally starting to move a kind of a weaker sanctuary cities bill. And then ethics reform passed the Senate early on, and the House hasn't done anything with it that I'm aware of, which doesn't make any sense. It's kind of a no-brainer issue. So we'll see where it goes from here. There's still a lot of work that has to be done, and like you said, 6 weeks left.
Do you think the governor it reinforces his views enough? I mean, I think so many people are used to Rick Perry still, where Rick Perry was forceful. Rick Perry was everywhere, and you don't see that. Governor Abbott is a different type of governor. Do you think that hurts his agenda?
It's a good question. This is something that I hear up the Capitol a lot. Questions about, where is the governor on one issue or another. I think generally his viewpoint is he wants to preserve his options and preserve flexibility. You look at something like the bathroom bill. I think from his standpoint, he looks at it and says, if the House isn't even going to give it a vote, why would I come out and disappoint, a certain number of people by taking a position one way or the other? That's kind of just the way he looks at issues. He has a judicial bearing. He is somewhat risk-averse. He's very analytical and very thoughtful, and this is the way he wants to govern. And I think he's obviously working through a very different legislative session this session than he did 2 years ago, when he got most of what he wanted as a new governor who won a pretty significant first election to that office. this is a different environment because the budget situation is so much tighter, and because most of everyone who's up there is looking at running for re-election and looking at primaries right now. So potentially, it's a question. I mean, there's obviously a big difference in terms of the personalities between Perry and Abbott, and it's not saying that one type is better than another. They're just different.
Yeah. Visiting with Matt Mackowiak, let's take a look at the national scene. Obviously, Congress in recess right now. They're going to get back soon, but you still have the president out. You still have this tension between North Korea and the United States. But it appears as though Trump's numbers are going up just a little bit in the approval. Are you surprised by that? Do you notice anything different coming from this administration in let's say days 75 to 100 than days 1 through 75? Are you noticing any difference?
Yeah, I am. I think he's really learning what this job requires. We've seen that in some of the reporting on, particularly on these foreign policy issues, that he now realizes they're much more complicated and multifaceted than maybe he thought they were initially. He wanted to label China a currency manipulator, but realized, number one, that they haven't really been doing that for several years, but number two, that he needs their help with North Korea more than he needs to label them a currency manipulator. So a lot of these issues are complicated, and they have several layers to them. And I think he's realizing that on foreign policy, he's much less limited or restricted by Congress or by politics or by the political environment or even by the public than he is on a lot of these domestic issues. And so I think that the strike against Syria, the Chinese premier's visit, just the kind of strong national security and defense and foreign policy team that he has, all that I think has increased the level of confidence the public has in him. That's why his poll numbers have gone up, as you said, 5 or 7 points in the last couple weeks. That's a very helpful thing. But obviously there is some major work ahead. You have a potential government shutdown next week. Congress only has 3 or 4 days when they come back next week to get that done. You've got a debt ceiling that's got to get increased. You obviously still have Obamacare and tax reform. There's not a clear path forward on either one of those issues. North Korea is a very big threat. There's no political solution to Syria. I mean, there's some really big, challenging issues out there. I do think his team, and both he and his team, have taken some very positive steps in the last few weeks, and that's part of why his poll numbers have gone up.
We're visiting with Matt Mackowiak, of course, GOP political strategist. Matt, you also have the Mac on Politics podcast. Tell folks about your podcast, the recent subject you were talking about, and where they can download that and where they can get your newsletter.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My podcast, most recent episode is with the former United States Ambassador to South Korea, Mark Lippert. We taped it, I think, on Friday. It might have been Thursday, but it's all about North Korea, and you can learn quite a bit about what our options are, what it was like to serve as ambassador to South Korea. He actually survived an assassination attempt while he was ambassador. It's a pretty compelling story. You can find that podcast in the iTunes store. You can find it on Google Play, on Stitcher, or also at onpolitics.com. And for folks that want to receive our morning Texas news email, you can Must Read Texas. You can sign up for that at mustreadtexas.com.
All right. As always, Matt, appreciate your time. We'll visit with you next week.
Have a great week, Chad. Take care.
You too. That's Matt Mackowiak, Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO.